Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Wanted to transition to talk about this amendment that was a big vote in the House yesterday. Congressman Massie, you offered this amendment. We can put D1 up on the screen here. Ultimately, it failed, but created quite a lot of intrigue in the Democratic caucus in particular. You were the only Republican that voted yes on this amendment, which cut all funding for Israel. You actually had a narrow majority of Democrats who did vote for the proposal, which is just such a sea change in the positioning of the Democratic Party. I mean, previously, the relationship with Israel was really lockstep across the board. So I'm curious for your reaction to how this vote broke down, and if you're surprised that none of your colleagues are where you are right now on this issue.
Well, the reason I was able to get this vote on the floor of the House, I sincerely wanted to vote. I offered 3 amendments to defund foreign aid to Egypt, foreign aid to Jordan, and foreign aid to Israel. And the Republican leadership, to my surprise, allowed me to get the vote on Israel. But I think that's because they made a political calculation. I believe it's a miscalculation, but they made a political calculation that this would be a hard vote for Democrats. And it did turn out to be a hard vote for Democrats. It should have been a hard vote for Republicans because now they've all locked into this idea that American taxpayers should give weapons and billions of dollars. I pointed out in my floor speech, we spend more on offensive weapons to Israel than we do on homeless veterans in the United States. And so every Republican has voted to send offensive weapons to Israel, $3.3 billion. The vote was successful, though. My litmus test, we've had votes like this in the past. You get maybe 6 or 10 people to vote for amendments like this. In fact, my vote to defund Jordan got 6 votes. Okay, but this was different. This moment in time is different because you can't objectively look at what's happening in Gaza and say that there's no moral hazard here for American taxpayers. 70,000 people have died in a country of 2 million people. I mean, it's incredible. It's horrific. And so, but the fact that I thought, let me just say, my own secret number in my head was people were like, how many votes are you going to get? I would say dozens because I thought I would get 24 votes. And 60, if I got 60, I would have considered it a success. And 100 was beyond what I imagined we could get. But eventually, Nancy Pelosi endorsed the amendment.
That was a shocker.
Crazy. I can only say that because I lost my primary. I think part of the reason I lost my primary is Ro Khanna endorsed it.
Don't blame me.
But, Nancy Pelosi came out for it. The minority whip came out for it. But the minority leader came out against it. So it really did split the Democrats. I think in time, this for the 103 Democrats and myself who voted not to send this money to Israel, it's as time goes on, that's going to be a better and better vote. And the people that were on the other side of that, including all of my conference except for me, are going to regret this vote.
Congressman Connolly, curious for your reaction. This was a major intra-democratic war. You had the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who voted for you, the majority whip, who then, of course, said that they would cut to vote 8. I'm curious for your reaction here about this split within the Democratic caucus. You were an original leader on a movement like this to watch, a significant portion of your Democratic colleagues eventually come to your position. What does that foretell for the future of the Democratic Party?
I was joking with Thomas that we had more caucus meetings discussing his amendment than any Democratic legislation.
Wow, that's crazy, actually.
They had like Sunday afternoon calls to discuss the Massie amendment and caucus meetings. But this should have been such a simple vote. I mean, there are we have to go beyond this, but obviously we shouldn't be giving them U.S. tax dollar aid for military weapons. In my view, we shouldn't be giving them military weapons to be killing civilians. And we need to be sanctioning the banks and government officials who are engaged in the settlement and work on recognizing the Palestinian state. But in my view, you had 103 folks, and the new Congress, you're going to have even more, and that it's going to become a very, very small minority eventually that is going to be saying, let's just have continued aid to Israel.
It's pretty wild to see Nancy Pelosi vote for it and Hakeem Jeffries vote against it.
Yeah.
And Pelosi, people are sharing all kinds of clips of her now saying, like, if the Capitol were to crumble, the one thing that would remain is our, solidarity with Israel. And now here she is on her way out. She's like, yeah, we'll vote to defund this. And I think she sees the writing on the wall. She's a very savvy political operator of where things are going. I cannot for the life of me really understand Hakeem Jeffries' calculus here. Because while there is such a split in the House Democratic caucus, there is not a split among the Democratic base. Overwhelmingly, it is now a small minority that want to maintain the status quo with regard to our relationship with Israel. So, what were those internal conversations like, to the extent that you can share some of the details? Because it's just very hard for me to understand why any cynical politician would look at this landscape on the Democratic side at this point and say, I want to stay with this position that has like 15% support among my own voters at this point.
Well, people were saying, oh, you're going to cut the Middle East diplomacy program. I said, by definition, that's probably one of the programs that should be cut or something. You want to look at government programs that don't work or something. But beyond that, okay, fine. You want to have those programs. That was less than 1% of the aid. And you could have voted for Massie's bill and then still said an amendment saying, well, we want to keep the program for Middle East peace. But I do think it's a mistake for anyone who voted this way morally, but also politically.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Claire Valdez, you look at Brad Lander, you look at Milat, you look at Anna Lilia, you look at Adam Amawi, you look at the Plattner before the scandals, Abdul, the driving line in these issues is the funding on Israel and Gaza. And the Democrats want to kind of whitewash that part. Oh, Zoran or these candidates won because of affordability. They won because they wanted free childcare, freeze the rent, or Medicare for all. All that matters. But the first point of the animating difference that is motivating these candidates and the energy is Israel. I mean, Milat would have been no shot to get. Get was good on all the issues. She was for Medicare for all, living wage. Why did she lose? She lost on this issue.
Wow.
And I just think that the political leadership it hasn't grappled with that reality.
Congressman Matt, I was coming to you because you were the only Republican who voted for it. I know you speak to many of your colleagues. You and I both know you're not the only person who thinks something like this.
Correct.
So why do they all? Well, why do they still see political utility in supporting Israel?
Because I just lost my election. I mean, $30 million, and 98% of that came from AIPAC or Republican Jewish Coalition or Miriam Adelson. It was all the race against me was fueled and funded by the Israeli lobby. And they made an example out of me, and it worked. I mean, you're getting senators who are changing their positions. You're getting House representatives, folks who are just going underground on the Republican side, not saying anything about it. But the one thing I want to talk about, two things. They realize this is a political liability, the Israeli lobby. So they're trying to take away the transparency of this money that's being spent, and they're trying to integrate it into our military budget. So it won't be a line item that Congress votes on. It'll be inside of one of these giant military omnibus type programs. Mm-hmm. And we won't even know, because we'll just, instead of giving them gift certificates for Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, we'll give them the bombs from Raytheon. And
they would develop them with us.
Right.
It's almost integrated.
Well, that's the second part, is that Section 219 of the NDAA is now, it's very toxic. And I'm trying to get a vote on that to strip that. Section 219 is, I think, what Rose was alluding to, which is integration of our intelligence and military with supply chains, supply lines and technology with Israel. It's a country of 10 million people.
Right.
Like, it's not even like NATO, where they're at least the third of the size of us. So there might be some reciprocal arrangement that could help in a world war. That's not going to help. With Israel can't help us in a war of a scale where our sovereignty is affected. It's only going to hurt us. Anyways, I'm trying to get an amendment in order to strip 219 from the NDAA. And if I can't get that done, or they don't allow us to have that vote, I think they're jeopardizing the NDAA. That stands for National Defense Authorization Act. Mm-hmm. It's one of the must-pass pieces of legislation, like a farm bill or a highway bill that passes every year.
Right.
Congressman Massie, I wanted to ask you some about that money that was spent against you. And I think you're right. They definitely wanted to make an example of you. A lot of that money came from the Israel lobby. They're now trying to do a similar thing with Abdul Sayed in the Michigan primary on the Democratic side. I think $50 million have come in. And again, the ads have nothing to do with Israel. They're claiming he's a sexist because he one time mildly criticized Michelle Obama. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that they're going with here. And I do wonder, again, from your perspective as a libertarian, if that changes any of your view of the ability for democracy to coexist with billionaires, the impact of money in politics. What are your views there? Has that shaped your philosophy or thinking about how we handle this flood of money, which is not just Israel, it's big pharma, it's big oil, it's the banks, it's all sorts of interests.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Has anybody ever told you you were over-opinionated? How about this one? You can talk about everything you like, but don't talk about religion. Don't talk about faith. Don't talk about politics. My name is Jerome McClain, host of Jerome McClain Show, and I want to introduce you to a show called Over-Opinionated with my friend from Southwest Virginia, Josh Scott. Josh has always been told he has been over-opinionated. He always tried to hold back these opinions, but he tried to back them up when he had to say something with facts and logic. Since he's grown up in many ways, he had to change a lot of his views and his opinions, as a lot of people should. He's not a millionaire from Fox News or CNN. He's just a hard-working, blue-collar type of guy. Give Josh Scott a shot at Over-Opinionated with Josh Scott. You can find him on patreon.com/overopinionated at 679. You can also check him out on Twitter at NRV_guy79. Over-Opinionated with Josh Scott, where he is this soft-spoken guy telling you the truth. We talk about a lot of serious topics on this show. One very serious topic is women's health. One company that stood out to me was vslay.com, because the owner is very transparent about her own struggles in the women's health department and has great customer service, great deals, and frequent sales. You can check her out, her great customer service, products about women's health, and frequent sales at www.vslay.com. That is www.vslay.com.
Are you asking did the ass whipping I took from the billionaires change my perspective?
I should have asked it that way.
It was a beatdown.
How are you feeling about billionaires these days? Yeah.
Well, we were able to raise $20 million. And so we had enough money. It's just they played dirtier than we were willing to play. They made artificial intelligence ads that showed me in a three-way relationship with AOC and Ilhan Omar. Mm-hmm. And, people fell for those ads. They thought they were real. So again, there's another libertarian conundrum that I have in addition to campaign finance, which I do equate with speech. But also here's another example of speech. Should they be able to make AI ads and run them with my image in it? You have to think very carefully about the legislative solutions that you don't make the situation worse. I think I could be okay with campaign finance that said, if you're running a congressional race, the only people who can donate are the people who can vote
in your district.
Now, Miriam Adelson may have moved to Kentucky. She was so motivated.
She'll build a casino on top of your house, just to make an
I
example.
think that is interesting because I know in the past you've pushed for transparency, which I think is an important first step.
Yeah.
But, at this point, there's a lot of mass education about who APAC is and what they are, et cetera. It's not that transparency, isn't there necessarily, but the problem is that just when you have so much money, of course, it's going to impact outcomes. And we can see it, in this vote from yesterday, too. So many of your colleagues take money from APAC or other similar groups. So many of the Democratic caucus, it should be based on the Democratic base. It should be overwhelming and not a problem for Democratic congressmen to vote, for an amendment like that. So you can see the impact of this money in the legislative process, not just electorally.
Well, ultimately, there was a win in my loss, which is I knew they would have to spend insane amounts of money. This is the most expensive congressional primary in the history of the United States. And I knew that if they would have to spend insane amounts of money, and if they did and I lost, it would sort of prove the point that they have too much influence in our own government that the Israeli lobby does. Now, they'll argue these are American citizens or dual citizens who are donating the money, but I would still say they're operating on behalf of a foreign country, and so they are foreign agents. I think they should have to register as such. But there was a victory in it. There was a big waking up. I don't think we would have gotten as many votes on my amendment if people hadn't watched me lose, because there was $30 million of Israeli lobby money poured into a little Kentucky race. But yeah, I don't know what the solution is. And then also on these AI ads, this fall is going to be the Wild West. Like, I got a taste of it in my own race. And, these weren't online ads. These were like local, Fox cable affiliates running these ads. So not a lot of people saw what's happening. But this November, both parties are going to run the most ridiculous AI ads. And if you write a piece of legislation that says you have to put a disclaimer on there, it doesn't help. That gives them a safe harbor to do anything.
Right.
They could show you doing anything and say, by the way, this was made with artificial intelligence, and people are still going to believe it because people watch videos and they don't read the little stuff at the bottom.
Yeah. My last question before we start, I know we're running a bit short on time, is about Senator Mitch McConnell. Do you believe the proof of life photo? And there's a lot of speculation that they're continuing to keep him in his Senate seat in order to prevent you from being able to run in a special primary or special election in the state. Your reaction?
Well, the special term would be less than 6 months now.
Sure.
And I'm not interested in running for that. I just broke news, I guess, to tell people.
I see you did.
Yeah.
And now they can come clean about Mitch McConnell.
So Mitch, tell us what's going on.
I think the public does deserve to see somebody walk up to a podium and say something. Now, whether we can believe that in this day and age is also another question. Yeah, right. But, I've said I'm going to introduce term limit legislation called 3 strokes and you're out. Because we've seen this in the House. We saw one of our colleagues disappear for 4 months, had dementia and was still a congressperson for many months.
Is she the one who was in a memory care facility?
Yes.
I remember that. Yes.
That's insane.
Yesterday we marked up a bill in judiciary called the National Fossils Act. And I asked them if this was about senators.
This is what happens when you don't have to run for it.
Do you think that Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna could run for president together and have some bipartisan kumbaya? I've been skeptical of that because I know you guys collaborate on a lot, but I also know there are a lot of ideological differences there. It would be hard to sort out. But what are you thinking about your future? Is politics still in your future? Senate run, presidential run? What are the sorts of things that you're, podcasts? What are the sorts of things you're
Please don't do all that.
Well, I'm not going to rule anything out. How about that? But the political terrain right now in Republican primaries is uphill for me.
Yeah.
The war in Iran, this doesn't get reported enough, is 70% popular among Republicans. Still is. And, that's in Kentucky where you have Rand Paul and Thomas Massie. In Oklahoma, where you don't have us, it's 80% popular, according to the pollster that I used. So, there's still, and then you saw the vote on Israel, sending the foreign aid. Republicans say they're conservative, they don't want to send money overseas, but then they have a little asterisk and they say, except we'll give Israel as much money as they need, and we'll empty our coffers for that. So I do have a few political positions that I think are going to be right in 4 years, 8 years. Maybe it only takes 2 years, but right now I'm against the grain of where you can win certain races. So
Yeah.
I'm going to watch for the tour. I should send Miriam Adelson a thank you card.
Sometimes these things work out in a way that you don't expect. So appreciate both of you guys for coming in. We've been wanting to have you here. We have Ro all the time. We always appreciate your time too, but to have you both together,
Thank
we
you.
really are.
Sir, exit interview before you go. You'll come back here?
Yes. And
Okay.
Ro and I have decided to run against each other.
I thought you were going to endorse my reelection.
You did that for me. We'll see what that happens.
They're like the dynamic duo themselves. Thank you both seriously.
Yeah,
much
love
for
for
your
you to
time.
come back so I can fight with you more about libertarianism.
Okay, yeah, we'll do it. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show. Help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.
Latest on the Iran war as Trump reportedly explores ground options. I'm sure that will go great. He also seemingly is announcing a cover-up of what exactly happened when we bombed that girls' school in Iran. Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are going to join us live in studio. They have a lot to talk about. They have a new Epstein Transparency Act that they are pushing that would help to enable prosecutions in places like New Mexico with the Zora Ranch. They also are just coming off the heels of this big vote in the House on Massie's amendment to strip aid from Israel, which created a whole fraction within the Democratic caucus. So very, very excited to have them live in person, have so many things that we want to ask them about. We also have some news here about Brad Parscale. I don't know if you guys remember this guy, but he was the campaign chief for Trump. He has now got a $45 million contract to run a pro-Israel influence operation that is effectively targeting undermining the Iranian war negotiations. So pretty fascinating dynamics there, and always important to expose who is getting paid and how these influence operations work. And I am taking a look at how Doge fueled the explosive diarrhea epidemic and some other problems that are going on in the country thanks to Doge as well. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that one.
Excited for that one. A lot of viral panic around this year. Maybe it's not panic. Maybe it's actually justified. I'm excited to listen. Thank you to everybody who's been subscribing to the show, breakingpoints.com. We, of course, have our free newsletter. But I do want to take a moment here to just thank all of our premium subscribers. It's a really cool moment when, Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, this all came together very quickly. And what we were able to do is our whole team just kicks into high gear for the studio, our producers, people getting here early. That is only enabled by the people who pay for our show. So breakingpoints.com, if you're able to do that. We were filming this a bit out of order, and it was just incredible. Like it's very rare to have that much time with these high profile politicians here in Washington. And just I'm very thankful for our premium subscribers.
Yeah. By the way, as a little teaser, you guys are always asking us if Ro and Thomas Massie would run together on a presidential ticket. So we do bring that. We do bring that up with them. So a lot of interesting responses, some news that's made, et cetera. You definitely want to check both of those blocks out because we split it into two.
BreakingPoints.com if you're able to support our show. If you're watching this on YouTube, no worries. Please hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. Listen to the podcast. Please share an episode with a friend. But let's go ahead and start, as Crystal said, with the Iran war. Let's put A1 up here on the screen. Some very troubling news out from the Wall Street Journal. Trump leans towards expanding U.S. military options in Iran. Quote, while preferring diplomacy, Trump was briefed this week on options, including use of ground troops and the bombing of Pickaxe Mountain. Longtime watchers of the show will know all about Pickaxe Mountain, which has become kind of this neocon. What's that castle the Israelis took in Lebanon?
Oh,
the useless castle, like Beaufort Castle.
Mm-hmm.
So the Pickaxe Mountain is the Beaufort Castle of the American neocons, where they've just decided this mountain, it's got to go. Alleged nuclear-linked site, and we can't finish the job until we've taken Pickaxe Mountain. But what's even more troubling here is that in the Situation Room meeting, they discussed, quote, potential seizure of Karg Island, which Trump has talked about, territory all along the Strait of Hormuz using U.S. troops, the bombing of the tunnel complex at Pickaxe Mountain, and expanding airstrikes against more targets in Iran, including energy strikes, all including that as a possibility. So there are some countervailing signs which will play for all of you, but right now, all the signs currently point towards more war. Let's go ahead and put A2 up here on the screen, a very predictable thing. It's the same time Trump is considering expanding military options. You have President Trump says Iran called him a while ago, and now they want to make a deal. And you also have, of course, the U.S. stock market, which extended its rally immediately upon the news. They never really learn, do they? Although it did end up closing down. At the same time, and I know we do mention this quite a bit, but you have to, I don't know, I just feel like it's so titanic that, and everything seems like it's fine, but with the oil where it's at, everyone who can read a chart, they're scared, and they're beyond scared, actually, with the resumption of hostilities. Put A3 up here. The traders themselves, the people who have been buying the Trump taco and all of that, largely have been, on the side of it's not as bad as some of the worst purveyors of doom had said in the original war. They are now coming out and saying we're close to running on empty as the Hormuz Strait is shut down again. So what they write is that member countries have already released 3/4 of the planned 400 million barrel emergency stock release that was announced in March. Quote, we have burned through all the buffers we had, everything. All of that is gone now. Oil prices have now rebounded somewhere around $80 to $85 a barrel. That's its highest since the original ceasefire was announced over a month ago. And what they also point out is that now the agreement, the governments in the West and in Asia, quote, had pulled almost every lever available to them to ensure a supply crunch would not undermine the world economy. Western powers have already released, vast amounts of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But what they say here specifically is that there's no more slack left within the system. And so if we do see another 6 to 8 weeks or maybe even a few more months of war, it is almost inevitable that shortages will come up somewhere. It won't be here in America. It certainly won't be, because we'll all just pay a very, very high price. But there's all of these other, factors that come into play where the Asian powers are the ones who, I read the Asian press almost every day just to see what they're saying about Iran. And they were actually pretty muted over the last few months. We're back to panic. They're like, here we go. What are we going to do? How are we going to get this oil out? It's 40 days away, 40 days, because in terms of tanker time, they're like, after that, we might run dry again. So the panic is setting back across East Asia.
I mean, I think we should take the president's word for it when he said, hey, another 4 weeks, right, I'm going to be Herbert Hoover and we're going to have all kinds of crisis because of the oil. I mean, he said that when he signed the MOU. And I think he was telling the truth at that point. And certainly he has analysts and also had all of the CEOs of the large oil and gas companies who came to him and were saying, hey, this is where we're at. So that timeline, is rapidly approaching. The clock is ticking. And in this article from the Financial Times, they have specific numbers. The IEA on Friday said its member countries had released almost 3/4 of the planned 400 million barrel emergency stock release. I don't know if you guys watched Ryan's interview with Robert Pape yesterday. Pape was sounding the alarm about this as well. The idea was that JD Vance floated, we're going to take this time to be able to refuel, restock, reload, whatever the verbiage was. Part of that was refilling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They have not done that. So we continue to have a dwindling of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve here in the U.S., where you're now getting down to the literal bottom of the barrel. There isn't a lot more buffer there. We don't know what China is going to do. China has taken extraordinary measures themselves to reduce the amount of oil that they were importing from abroad. How long is that going to last? It really, really is a very troubling situation. And, so I'm sure this is why Trump's coming out and say, they want to make a deal, et cetera. But I can tell you this morning, I was just reading an article on CNBC. The Iranians are threatening aggressive retaliation because Trump is once again saying, we're going to blow up their bridges, their power plants, et cetera, with some credibility because they've attacked civilian infrastructure with no qualms in the past. The Iranians said everything in the region that is still intact, all the infrastructure in the region will be crushed under the steel blows of the powerful armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So no trace of them remains, and it is as if they never existed in the first place. They added that under no circumstances and in no way will we allow America as a foreign and extra-regional country to interfere in the Strait of Hormuz. This is Iran's invincible red line. Now, obviously, there's a lot of propaganda bluster there, but in terms of the Strait of Hormuz being a hard red line that they will enforce, I think they have a lot of credibility at this point on that front.
I think you're totally right. And I think what really, is worrisome is the disconnect in the messaging from the U.S. government. And so Trump yesterday gave an interview where, he was said, well, maybe we'll just wipe them out, like in terms of the IRGC. And of course, some Fox News interview. These people have, their IQ has got to be like bottom of the barrel. He goes, are you just going to wipe out the IRGC like you did ISIS? I'm like, yeah, it's not like we didn't just try to wipe out the IRGC. Are you an idiot? Anyways, yeah, I digress. And Trump goes, yeah, maybe I will. Meanwhile, the vice president on the Joe Rogan podcast is making this tortured effort to say diplomacy's still on track. These are just blips in the radar, right? And I mean, in some ways, he does say the truth out loud, which is for the people who want us to keep bombing, there's nothing else that can be done. He's like, eventually we do have to sit across from the table, but you have to convince Trump of that. So here is JD Vance, A7, I'm going to start with, saying, look, the people who want us to keep bombing, they have no solution. I would just add the addendum is here he's trying to go after the neocons. Trump is also one of those neocons, at least as of right now. Let's take a listen.
What is their proposal? The people that think you shouldn't negotiate with Iran.
I think that their proposal is to bomb and bomb and bomb. And the honest view, Joe, is that they do not actually have a solution. If you actually ask them, what do you want us to do? What is the goal that you're trying to achieve? They'll say things like, we'll just bomb them to oblivion. Okay, we can do that. We can drop a lot of bombs. But what does that accomplish if there's still a crazy person who's still unwilling to shoot a few drones at the Strait of Hormuz? What the president has done, I think very, very capably, is said, we're going to use military force in this situation when it's connected to something we're trying to achieve. So if you shoot at ships, we're going to shoot at the facilities at which you use to shoot at the ships. But we're not just going to do something open-ended indefinitely. We're not just going to bomb and bomb and bomb. We're going to try to use our military force as one of the many tools that we have to solve the problem.
So you can see there, I mean, what he's talking about is the inevitable logic. But again, like Trump is the person who wants to resume bombing. And this is the basic fracture in the administration. JD is very committed to the negotiation track, but there are other elements in the government which just don't care at all. Our friends at Drop Site, Jeremy Scahill and Ryan, let's go to their story, A8 up here on the screen. They say Iran sent a message to JD warning that Kushner and Witkoff, quote, were abusing their inside access to negotiations. By the way, the White House totally denied it. They said this is all, completely fake, etc. But here's what a senior Iranian official who said directly to Drop Site. We've transmitted data and assessments through an exclusive channel to Mr. Vance with direct knowledge of the effort. Communicated to Vance, they believed Witkoff and Kushner were abusing the diplomatic process, effectively disrupting the overall negotiating atmosphere. At one point, they claimed that Iran had calculated profits from such alleged manipulation from Witkoff and Kushner that reached $9 billion and formally requested in writing that Iran should have to share in the proceeds of all of their insider trading. Again, to be very clear, Witkoff and Kushner completely deny it. The White House says that none of this ever took place.
The American people need to formally submit our request to share in those proceeds. What do you think?
Yeah, let me in. Let me in.
But I mean, the crux of this, the allegation here is that their corrupt inside trading is screwing up the effort to come to some sort of a negotiated deal here. It's an obstacle. It creates a problem in terms of actually sitting down, having some sort of negotiation that is perceived as remotely in good faith. When all you see is these guys, it's got all these development deals in the region. You see all these market manipulations from Trump and what he tweets, etc. That is making it actively more difficult to not be in this war. So it's not just a question of morality, and it's disgusting the number of people in the Trump administration, including Trump and his family et al., who are just using the country as their personal piggy bank. But it has a direct impact on what is happening to our country, on the way our foreign policy is conducted, and on what is actually possible in terms of these negotiations.
And what I think is the worst is we just don't see a realistic path to actual resolution. Do I think there will be another fake memorandum of understanding? Yeah, because inevitably you have to, right? Oil has got to flow eventually. But are we really going to solve the nuclear issue? It just seems so impossible. If we can't even sit without firing bombs for 3 weeks, how can we possibly get to a situation where the United States has to accept Iranian tolls and control of the Strait of Hormuz, and then furthermore, basically guarantee Iran hundreds of billions of dollars while they give up their nuclear ambitions for 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems impossible. And it's like, I'm gonna kick right now. I'm reading a lot of World War I and World War II history, like more so even than normal. And when you see what it takes to either defeat somebody or bring them to the negotiating table, you haven't bled enough. And I know that it's a horrible thing to say, but it's just empirically true, either from loss of life or economically. Like the vast majority of Americans really only pay attention when gas prices are high. How many know that as of right now, today, while you and I are speaking, Kuwait is under fire from cruise missiles? Not many.
Yeah.
And they don't particularly care, right? They're not going to care, honestly, until gas is $7 a gallon. Iran knows this. That's why they continue to close the Strait of Hormuz. But there's just enough wiggle room there and, crazy stuff from the Trump administration and other to try and just push it off further. And then same on the Iranian side. I agree with Treats. I think they dramatically overreacted by trying to undermine this memorandum of understanding, as in immediately shooting instead of calling. But I also get it from their perspective when Trump is like, I'm going to kill you while you're in the middle of Geneva. Like if somebody said that to me, it's like if I were to negotiate with a pro-Israel person, immediately I'm always like, you're lying. It's like my absolute, going in, how could we ever establish any baseline of trust? It's just somebody who's like constantly trying to undermine you, try to kill you.
Yeah.
I understand where they're coming from too. So I don't see how we can get out of this. Like somebody has got to bleed a lot. And I hope it's not us, but I seem to think so.
Well, and on the politics of it, we already recorded the interview with Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, and Congressman Massie said something that was, I think, important for people to hear, because there's a lot of sense, because you see the Tuckers out there, and you see the Tim Dillons out there, who are unhappy, who are on the right and unhappy with the Zagar and Jetties of the world, who are unhappy with the Iran war. The MAGA base supports it.
Yeah.
They're all in. It's like 70, 80% of the MAGA base that's like, yes, Iran war. And so when we were asking Thomas Massie about the nature of his primary defeat, he made sure to bring up, it was the Israel lobby, it was going against Trump. It was also the Iran war, being opposed to it because it's very popular. And we were asking about his future political ambitions. He's like, that's going to be a real obstacle for me in the Republican Party for now. That terrain may shift, but for now, it's a problem. And I think it's very different from how people are perceiving the politics of it, because for Trump, looking at the midterms, the landscape is already really bad. People are unhappy. Republicans are sort of disenchanted over the Epstein files and other things. There's a lot of malaise there. So they're already less likely to turn up at the polls than Democrats. We've seen that in all kinds of special elections. You ask them to also swallow a humiliating Iran war defeat. That is actually going to make your midterm results even worse than they already are. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't from Trump for a political perspective. But it actually, his political incentives are not necessarily to end the war now. His political incentives may be to keep it going through the midterm so he doesn't have to fully swallow the level of humiliation that will be required to bring this thing to a close. And so I think that's another dynamic here that we have to take into account as well. His base wants this war to keep going. They want to see the bombs dropped at Karg Island taken and him to be, a heroic, tough guy, etc. They don't want to see, oh, now we've done sanctions relief and Iran has all of this newfound power in the region. That is not where they are.
That's where Pape's escalation trap, model is just it is so obviously true at this point. And it is also, very tragically for the U.S. and even for Iran. Look, Iran is desperate because what they also know, as I was reading this morning, is the world will eventually figure it out, like we did with Ukraine and Russia, right? At the beginning, it was a crisis. After a couple of years, you figure out how to get natural gas to different places. It's bad, but everyone kind of moves on. Iran has got to actually force hand now. So they have a direct incentive. At the same time, America, which has not bled, and Trump, who cannot admit total defeat, at least not yet, has got to do something extra. And in any one of those extra maneuvers, it brings death and immense cost to America. Because we had Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna added at last minute, there was this whole segment that I was going to do about all of the lack of munitions. It is so much worse than even I thought. $500 million we put into a factory. It hasn't produced a single round. Not one round. 500 million. And we gave 3 million of these rounds to Ukraine. The whole point of the money, remember, Biden was like, this is good for America because we'll make all these weapons here. They haven't been made. It's impossible to make, apparently, just from our manufacturing backlog. I'm looking at the state of the U.S. Navy. The F-35, for the first time in 20 years, the Pentagon is blocking an open source report about the F-35. Why do you think after one just got hit over Iran? I'm looking at this. And then the oil, I mean, again, you have to read only a few books to say it may not be the Iran war that breaks this. It may be the total destruction and depletion of the American empire as a result of this. Then when the next one comes completely out of nowhere, that's how you find yourself broken completely and you lose everything in a matter of a month. That's the stuff that just absolutely terrifies me. And you can just see it, every day. 4 missiles here, cruise missiles there, drones going here, Iranian ships, the United States bombed an oil tanker, which was docking at Karg Island for the first time ever. We had never done that before. As a result, they blew that up and potentially some oil infrastructure. Iran is saying, very seriously, you are going to burn if you continue this. And I don't see a way out. The one last piece potentially of good news that, I don't want to say that it hasn't happened is let's put A9 up here on the screen, is it does appear that there was some American woman. Trump writes, Iran has allowed an American citizen who was wrongfully detained in December 2024 under Joe Biden to leave the country. She is now safely outside of Iran and in good condition. America appreciates this gesture of goodwill from Iran. So that could be a good thing. I just don't know. But my only, I have no idea who this woman is. There's no open source reporting or any of this. This could potentially try to be a sign of, putting things back on track. But just like America has internal factions and domestic politics, so does Iran. It's very clear their hardline faction doesn't want to give another inch. So we'll see. That's what else can we say? Let's get to Minab. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show. Help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.
I'm going to end the show talking about something that is going to be very important because it is important, and that is data centers. I've been hearing a lot about them. A lot of the stuff that you hear is kind of doom and gloom, but at any rate, there's something that happened in the Commonwealth of Virginia in Loudoun County that should give us pause, and coming from somebody that I'm not shocked, not a fan of, Jim Clyburn. Check this out. We're going to end the show with 2 data stories, and then we're going to do a show where it's going to be me talking very candidly about some things that I've been interested in.
Well, Jim Clyburn, obviously one of the more high-profile Democrats in the House of Representatives, stopped by the podcast of Estelle Herndon last week and got a question about AI, gave an answer that I want to say is surprising. Unfortunately, it's not surprising, but it is astounding nonetheless. Let's take a look.
I want to ask you about AI. There's so much that it's changing in terms of the future of work and our economy. Do you use AI? Have you ever used an LLM?
No, somebody was telling me I ought to, but I never have.
No ChatGPT, no Claude for you?
Believe it or not, I didn't know what that was until about a week ago.
Which one?
ChatGPT or whatever it is.
You didn't know till a week ago. Wow. I
didn't know what that was.
Okay. Have you been to a data center or anything like that? Or no? Okay. I guess I'm wondering, with the speed of technological changes right now, with how much people are anxious about the ways AI and work might change because of it, how do you effectively legislate as a member who is distant from some of those technological shifts that are affecting folks' lives right now?
I have a great staff. I wish I could know everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know everything. And I don't spend my time trying to learn everything.
Mm-hmm.
What I spend my time doing is trying to surround myself with people who do know stuff.
Crystal, this is somehow worse, I think. I don't need to get into too much tit for tat, but worse than Ted Cruz not knowing the population of Iran as he was agitating for war in Iran, given how central data centers are right now to the American economy, how companies like OpenAI, ChatGPT, how central they are to the American economy, to national security, to people's daily lives. That is insane. And it's not just like saying my staff knows the ins and outs of the building code policy to get this thing up and running. Like he literally said he's outsourcing all of his knowledge of AI to his staff, basically.
And I want people to understand this is not an outlier. You have members of Congress who approach their jobs very differently. Some of them are really involved in thinking through policy and educating themselves. They have a worldview. They're pushing that worldview forward. And some of them are like Jim Clyburn, who are happy to, he's 80-some years old. He's happy to outsource all of his work and thinking to his staff. So you're really not electing this person. You're electing whoever their staffers are who are actually going to be doing the research and telling this man how he should vote. And you're also electing a whole host of lobbyists and special interests who will also be coming to him and telling him how he should vote on various issues. I just looked it up quickly. South Carolina has been a hotspot for data center construction. There's roughly 30 projects in existence, more in the pipeline. So this is a very relevant issue for his constituents. And he says, I've never visited a data center. I barely know what ChatGPT is. I've never used any of these products. So pretty stunning revelation there. At the same time, we were struck by this was pulled by More Perfect Union, highlighted this local news report about the strain that data centers here in Virginia, which is perhaps the data center capital of the nation, maybe the world, are putting on the grid right now here in the present, while obviously they have massive plans to expand the data center load across the country. Let's go ahead and take a listen to a little bit of this local news report.
Something happened on Wednesday morning that you might have noticed but didn't bat an eye. It happened inside thousands of your homes and businesses, and experts say it's a sign the cracks are starting to show in our power infrastructure.
Yeah, just before 8 a.m., the electricity flickered on and off for about 10 minutes. It was the result of data centers in Loudoun County, Virginia.
Experts say the cracks in our infrastructure grid are starting to show as the data center industry consumes electricity at a rate the world has never experienced. Wednesday morning, that crack became visible to millions of Americans inside their own homes in a seemingly small way.
This is what experts are worried about, right? The data centers are such a big load on the grid that they can have detrimental impact on the surrounding grid.
Dominion Energy tells News 4 a transmission line servicing a data center failed, so the data centers switched to their own power supply, temporarily leaving the grid. In a statement to News 4, a Dominion Energy spokesperson said, quote, Dominion Energy did not disconnect area data centers from the grid. The data center's own control systems transferred them to backup power for a very short period of time. Think of it like ripples in water. The data center is switching their power source as the rock, and when that change impacts the water, or the power grid in this analogy, the massive shift in electricity load sent ripples through the electric current across half the country. Ting Labs provided News 4 with this graphic that shows the scale of the service disruption.
These events in the future could cause the grid to become unstable, and it does not come back to normal in a few minutes or 10 minutes, and we're dealing with a real big problem.
So, Emily, this seems like something our elected leaders should maybe be looking into and care about and, thinking about themselves, not just outsourcing to their staffers. But, this is something that we've been warning about, and many others besides. The strain on the grid is really a major issue. It's not being resolved, and it's only going to get worse over time. So this is a bit of a warning shot here.
Well, I was going to say this is about the concentration of power, but in this case, it's literally about the concentration of power. Sure. This is all being traced to Loudoun County, Virginia data center alley. And I'm curious how many times Jim Clyburn voted on something in one direction or the other that set up our economy to look like this in a way that enables the concentration of actual power. In a sense where it's so clustered that it can affect the entire East Coast in one fell swoop like that. I'm sure you could go and find votes that, indirectly enabled the economy to look the way maybe you could even find ways that directly enabled the economy to look the way that it does. But astounding, he's so comfortable outsourcing the staff. He didn't learn what ChatGPT was until a week ago. And meanwhile, we're already seeing these ripples from Loudoun County across the East Coast. That's how dramatic the gap in knowledge is.
Yeah, it's just extra. I mean, are you living under a rock? How do you not even know what this is? Who are you talking to? Where are you getting your news from? It's just on every level. How did you manage to avoid this particular knowledge? And what other pieces of knowledge are you somehow managing to avoid? Raises a lot of questions. I got a bit of a 1-2 punch for you here in terms of the progress of the tech industry pushing forward with these data centers over the objections of the public. We can put this up on the screen. You've got 300 bans now and moratoriums that the information is tracking that say they threaten the U.S. data center boom. This has increasingly become a hot political issue, both at the local, the state, and the federal level. It's something I'm going to ask Francesca Hong about in our interview with her, because it's something she's certainly been campaigning on. We talked to Will Lawrence, who's a congressional candidate in Michigan, who also has been talking a lot about data centers and, making sure that there is a slowdown, at least, if not a moratorium, on the building of these data centers. At the same time, put D4 up on the screen. They're going to, instead of going through any sort of public process, what they're going to do is something very similar to what happened in Louisiana, where they work behind the scenes with politicians. This is Meta specifically, with politicians who signed non-disclosure agreements, which is an incredible, that should be illegal in my opinion. It's technically not, but I certainly think it's unethical for politicians doing public policy to sign non-disclosure agreements with the companies they're negotiating with. They rush through the approvals to get this data center, massive data center, built in a very rural and very impoverished part of Louisiana, with very little, really next to no ability for local residents to be able to weigh in on whether they thought this was a good or a bad thing. Now, let me be clear, and I think we're going to see this dynamic develop as well. This was an area, as I mentioned before, it was really rural, impoverished community. And so the promise here was, we're going to build this data center. There's going to be tons of job creation. It's going to revitalize this community. And in some senses, that has happened. During the construction phase, they've had huge number of construction workers coming into the area. Some of the local people have been able to get construction jobs working on the data center. So it's been good for them. But they also talked to some of the residents who had been living in trailer parks, which are very common there, who had their rent for their lot escalate so dramatically that they had to move out of the town entirely. One woman who has, I think, 3 or 4 kids, was living there. She was paying $250 a month in rent. She owned her trailer, but you have to rent the lot that it sits on. They jacked her rent up in a single month to $1,200. So more than $1,000 increase that she was just supposed to swallow. She couldn't do it. Oftentimes it's expensive to move the trailer, or they're just not really constructed in a way to be sturdy enough to be able to move them. She had to sit there and watch as they cut her trailer down into pieces. Her kids and her had to live for a time out of her car. So this sort of disruption is taking place as well. And then the mayor of the town said, it's okay for now. You've got a lot of people coming in. After it's built, our longtime residents are being pushed out of the area. Who and what is going to be left here after this thing is ultimately built? So, but the important piece I wanted to highlight is that, number one, it's going to be a lot of poor communities that these things are foisted upon because they are desperate and they need the tax revenue, and they'll grab onto anything that looks like jobs and opportunity. And number two, that legislators will increasingly find ways, given that their campaign coffers are being flooded with cash from these companies, and with the promise of future board seats or lobbying gigs, et cetera, that they will find ways to circumvent a democratic public process and do this behind the scenes so they can continue to push this forward over the objections of the public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And meanwhile, DC is being flooded with lobbying cash from these companies. And like you said, the revolving door, politicians know it'll be wide open. Maybe not for Jim Clyburn, who would probably have to brush up on ChatGPT and fully intends to remain in that seat until he McConnell's, which we'll be talking about in just a moment, Crystal. But
Joy Reid calls him Glitchy Mitchy, which I kind of like.
Glitch McConnell, man, he's and this has been going on for years with Glitch, Senator Glitch, and so it's just like that. Like you said, it's not isolated. The fact that he came out and said this aloud and seemed to have zero shame about it, and just said, "Well, it may sound strange to you." It's like, no, it's not strange to literally everyone my man. Like that's brutal. And again, his staff is getting lobbied. They're all getting lobbied enormously. So that tells you, to your point, Crystal, about who's making the decisions. If you're offloading a lot of these big decisions to your staff and you're doing it so comfortably, well, they're getting lobbied. They're going to junkets, happy hours, like they have these people in their ear and they're not the elected representative.
That's exactly right. We got a couple of stories here too that speak to the sort of more, I guess, existential nature of the AI threat. This is really disturbing. Put D5 up on the screen. AI companies have been bulk buying rare books, scanning them through high-speed machines that cut the spines off and then shred the originals. This has been tracked by a number of news outlets. This particular account is called Hedge Markets. In any case, this is really disturbing because you're talking about the entire corpus of human knowledge. You're talking about books that there may only be one remaining in existence or only a handful remaining in existence that have not been, scanned into the internet so you can just access them at some later time. This is the only proof of their existence. And they're just being chopped up and fed into this AI beast. I think this really struck a nerve with people, Emily, because it does feel like a direct assault on our humanity, on our creativity, on our, the bank of knowledge that we've sort of like a virtual or modern day mass book burning that has been occurring in the background that we didn't even know about.
A man named Charlie Becker posted a really interesting post on X about this. His family runs Houston's largest used and rare bookstore, according to his post, and he's been working to build an AI tool for bookstores like his. He says every ingredient of the viral story is true. Booksellers really are getting bizarre bulk orders, but quote, rare here isn't what you're picturing. It's the Insider's Guide to Metro Denver from 1995 and How to Use WordPerfect 1991 manuals, obscure but often not precious. And he goes on to say, though, that this is more mundane than the Shredder story. The actual risk is worse because it's quieter. Books that don't sell eventually get liquidated. So if they don't sell via FBA, they end up getting liquidated. And he says if we really hold the last copies of some of these, we're feeding them into a portal they may not come back from. No AI company required. So basically he's saying he thinks that these are bulk orders done by an AI to mark up and resell things on Amazon. But because when you do that, most of the books don't sell, they end up getting shredded anyway. And so it's like a mess, no matter how you slice it, and one that is doing exactly what you just said is going to do in the name of like turning around profits with this technology that allows you to spread the cost out in mass around the world.
And then, Emily, I wonder what you think about this. We talk a lot, I think, understandably, because people are concerned about it, about the way AI is already and is promising to displace a lot of human beings. But there's also a real existential layer to this as well of like, what is our purpose and what are we passionate about and, what gives our lives meaning? And there is this extraordinary Substack, we can put this up on the screen, from this man, Kerwin Hamsher, who was a mathematician. And he's describing the way that he is experiencing this crisis of identity, because the headline here is The Dark Night of Mathematics. What are we really doing? Because you've had AI now be able to solve some long-standing, what are called conjectures, these, math problems. I don't know what I'm talking about here, guys, sorry. But in any case, been able to solve these problems that have existed for years and, or decades, that mathematicians and math enthusiasts have been puzzling over for years and years and years. And now you have AI just basically come in and like, oh, here's the answer, done. And so he says, I'm going insane. During the last week or so, LLMs have produced a number of counterexamples to significant long-standing conjectures. I won't recount these happenings here. There are many places where you can find the details. Mathematicians, math enthusiasts, and curious lay people are responding to these developments in ways that I believe obscure what is, for me, the true heart of the problem. I don't speak for everyone in the math community in my response, but I suspect I'm not alone. I'm suffering a profound spiritual crisis due to these developments. I've been screaming internally for days. It feels as though I'm living inside of a nightmare. He says the recent lead-in declaration on AI and mathematics is to me a well-muffled scream, a saccharine melange of self-soothing, of which looms a painfully obvious absence. And effectively he says, okay, so if mathematical discovery, if that's just over now, like the LLMs are just better than us now, what's left for us? And he goes on to say, look, even if you were to ban all of the AI and put it back, this discovery process back in the hands of humans, we would always know it was a sort of lie, that we had rigged it so that we could be the ones that discover the answer when you have this technology out there that would have reached, would have been able to solve these problems much more rapidly. And so, I thought it was pretty profound to think about. And he's experiencing this in math. He says, I don't know what to do. There may be nothing you can do. I have no prescriptions, policy recommendations, or coherent calls to action. I just want to be honest and open about my emotional and spiritual response. I want to feel seen. I want folks like me to feel seen. I need the architects of our new mathematical paradigm to look me in the eye, acknowledge our shared humanity and soul before they deliver the coup de grace. I need most of all for us to understand what we are really doing. So I don't know. What do you think about that,
I mean, we are layering computer on top of computer on top of computer. Everything is computer, as Trump would say, but that might be the truest thing that he's ever said. Math is the infrastructure around us. Like, that's what builds the infrastructure around us. So think of when you have a further reduction of the human element. Of course, some of this has already been offloaded to computers, but when you take the human element almost completely out of it, and then you have computer solving problem on top of computer solving problem on top of computer solving problem, obviously, there are things that can get baked into that are enormously problematic. And also, high-level math is art. It is literally art. It's like Coltrane. It's music. It's not just, these like abstract Goodwill Hunting chalkboard problems. They're really meaningful problems, human problems. And it's great that we can progress if we can. If it's used for genuine progress, it's great that we can do it more quickly and perhaps more efficiently and with more sense of accuracy. Maybe that's great in theory, but I don't know that anybody trusts that this is actually happening in a way that's good for humanity and not actually unsafe and less human in a less safe way. I don't have that trust, and it just scares me that this process is happening all around us so quickly. It is not like the transition from horses to automobiles. It is not like the transition to air travel, right? Like, this is happening. Those all happened actually pretty quickly. This is happening even faster, and it's building on itself. Yeah. And there's just no trust.
It makes me think about the rapid transition that was experienced in the industrial Midwest, where all of these factories closed, towns that were built around the factories just completely collapsed. You had men who had mostly men, who had previously been able to earn a good living and support a family and buy a house, et cetera, who lose all of that. And a lot of that is, we tend to focus on what's measurable. That's the material loss, but it's also a profound psychological blow. And I think our politics today really reflects the lack of recovery and tending to that psychological blow of, now you have no skill that's relevant to people. Now you are unable to provide for yourself and for your family and, aspire for better things for your kids. And I think we aren't really grappling with what the psychological toll of AI will be, because in a sense, how can we? We don't really know what it's going to be. But it did remind me, and I'll just end with this because we have a guest standing by, but I read the Three Body Problem trilogy. And in the first book, and I'm not really giving away anything here, but everybody should read them because they're fantastic books. But anyway, there's a spate of scientists who are committing suicide. And it starts with this sort of mystery of like, what is going on with these scientists? Why do they keep killing themselves? And come to find out, okay, I'm giving away a little bit, but basically they've been thwarted and their experiments are coming out in these crazy ways where they're sort of becoming convinced that the science that they accepted wasn't real and that there's no physically in quantum physics. And for reasons that I won't divulge because that does give some away, it comes to be realized that they have in fact been thwarted and they are being prevented from making any further progress. Ended of that, reading his explanation of what he describes as the spiritual crisis that he's going through. So anyway, one more impact of AI that we're all going to have to grapple with.
No, I mean, my mom grew up in one of those towns and a bunch of my family is still there. And we all have seen what happens. And that was in Wisconsin. And we've all seen what happens where opioids filled the gap.
Yeah, that's right.
Where I remember David Obey represented that district for a long time. And he said he regretted how ineffective the job training programs that they were promised after, I forget whether it was NAFTA or WTO, came in. He ended up losing his seat, by the way, to Sean Duffy in 2010, before really the MAGA revolution. It flipped. That was a Dem district for 40 years. So people get really, really, really profoundly psychologically unsettled. And then, of course, our special interest fueled economy swoops in with something awful to fill the gap often. And that breeds more and more resentment and division. And it's like we're heading straight down that road once again.
Well, let's talk about one of the architects of that world that we live in now, Mitch McConnell.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.